Alrighty, let's see if this is all up to snuff and okay. Let's take a look here. Let's make sure everything is good and we can hear everything and everything is okay. Let's see how it sounds. Make sure the sound is good. I think the sound is good. I think we're okay over here. Let's just share this puppy. I don't know why people call it puppy, but let's just share this on ye old Twitter. And after we share this on Twitter, we will start the show and get on with all of this stuff. All right. Let's copy the link. Let's go over to Twitter. And we share this, let's share it. Let's see how it goes. Let's find Twitter somewhere. Where is my page? Who knows? Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right, I think we are sufficiently shared. It's technically 2:30, which I believe means it's time to get going. So we're going to go ahead and get going. We're going to run this thing and see what happens. We're going to just see what happens, folks. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? Literally, who knows? All right. Well, it's really good to see you all here. Thank you all for showing up and coming to chat. For those of you who come to chat, this is UnShrink Me, and I am Dr. Patrick Lockwood. Technically, I'm just Patrick for this purpose, so don't sue me or anything. But I am here running this weekly podcast on clinical psychology, psychotherapy, and similar kinds of topics. UnShrink Me is a podcast dedicated towards mental health and creating a more informed consumer base, because as many of you know, there are many, many gurus out there who believe that they have cornered the market on mental health. There are tech bro gurus. There are psychologist gurus. There are non-clinician gurus. There are spiritual gurus. There are people of all backgrounds and all belief systems and all skin colors and genders and things like that who believe they have cornered the market on being well. And the problem I have with that is most of them are full of shit and they're sick. And they don't get how they're hurting people and not helping people. And so the whole spirit of this podcast is, can we debunk the nonsense that exists out there? Number one. But number two, and more importantly, can we provide useful, reasonable, practical, understandable ideas and feedback that allow people to make more informed choices when they do run into this latest cold plunge podcast or diaphragmatic breathing, box breathing expert, or whatever it is. Because there's so much good stuff out there that actually helps people enhance their mental health. And so I don't want people to be turned off by the profession or by even the influencer types who might have something useful to say. But I don't want you to believe in the gurus. I want you to look at things very critically, because when we are appropriately critical, we can help more people get the correct kinds of information and have the correct attitudes that allow them to actually get what they need from the professionals and the ideas that they're being sold. And people are being sold ideas, just so we're clear. So please, please, please like, share, and subscribe if you find this helpful, interesting, and occasionally potentially funny. So today we have some lots of fun stuff. And as always, we are not NOT sponsored by Celsius. But maybe someday, because this is really good stuff and I love it. It tastes good. It's good for me, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe it's causing cancer. Who fucking knows? But I like it for now. So we are going to move on today. Lots of interesting topics. We're going to talk about bad therapists. We're going to talk about good therapists. We're going to talk about what you owe people, if anything. We're going to talk about safe spaces, especially for conservatives. And we're going to talk about aggression. Because why not? So, where should we start? Let's start with Justin Garson. Even though I know that I've talked about him fairly frequently for the past couple of weeks. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm just dedicating this entire podcast to him. I promise you this is not a shit on Justin podcast. But I just want to talk about something he said because, again, I want you to not be deceived by mental health influencers or anti-mental health influencers or whatever. I want to talk about things realistically so you can make realistic, reasonable choices, right? So I'm going to retweet this as always, and we're going to just have a rational conversation. Okay? So here's how this is going to go. So here's what he said on, August 10th, 8/10. And hopefully I'll do this justice. Because again, I don't know him. I don't know the intentions or anything. So I'm just kind of operating with very minimal context for who Justin actually is. So here's what Justin at JUSTIN_GARSON said on August 10th. He said, "It's extraordinary to me that for 99.9% of humans, mental health comes down to a few stupidly obvious things like food, sunlight, movement, and a living wage, and some close friends. Equally extraordinary is how far psychiatry will go to deny the simple truth." So as I have said, I think for at least the last 2 weeks, if not even further back, I have no clue what psychiatric professionals Justin has interacted with in his life. Maybe he's interacted with some terrible people, and if that's true, I'm sorry to hear that. I have never met a psychiatrist who denies the importance of eating right, sleeping, and good friends. What else did he say? Sunlight, movement, a living wage. Like, I've never met a mental health professional in my career in 15 years who is like, none of those things matter and they don't affect your mental health. So what he's saying, I believe, is kind of this false equivalence or the straw man, which is psychiatrists don't care about these things, which I just don't think is true. Because he said for 99.9% of humans, mental health is these 6 things he just listed, right? But the truth of the matter is, there are actually genuinely mentally ill people with bipolar disorder, people with serious schizophrenia, people with personality disorders, people with serious drug problems we call addictions. So that's maybe 5%, 8% of the population that I just described right there. And so it's not 99.9% of the population, Justin. There are actually very ill people that exist on the planet, and you cannot just diet away your bipolar. Even Chris Palmer, the psychiatrist from Harvard, who likes the ketogenic diet, does not believe you can magically keto away bipolar or schizophrenia. So metabolic health is important. Having healthy friendships is important. Having a living wage so you're not desperately poor and stressed out all day is important. All these things matter. And so I'm not against any of these things. All these things are great and they matter and they're all a big deal. And for the people that are genuinely mentally ill, there is no amount of sleeping right and dieting right that will magically just get rid of their hallucinations. I wish that were the case. I really genuinely do. I genuinely wish that we could help people who are very mentally ill just eat better and sleep better and have better friendships, and that would solve the problem. But there are these people with these very real mental illnesses that actually need psychiatric help in some cases and actually need psychotherapy in order to be not only stable, but also heal and grow and change and things like that. So what I will say, as I have said many times before on this podcast, that I don't know who Justin has been talking to. I would love to meet these psychiatrists who say it's never important to deal with these things. The vast majority of people in the mental health profession recognize that some people are overdiagnosed and shouldn't be diagnosed. Some people are subclinical. Some people need meds, some people don't. There are some old school zealots who believe more people need meds. They exist too. But Justin just loves these straw men. He also likes making shit up. It is not true that 99.9% of people on the planet just need to eat better, sleep better, and have better friendships. Although those things are important, there's just literally no way just like forcing yourself to do these things will magically heal your PTSD if you're a veteran who like had to kill people for a living to stay alive and all these, like there's just nothing about that will fix that. That's insane and absurd. So at some point I want to talk to Justin and just like have a deeper understanding of why he says these things, because they're just so out of the blue confusing to me. I just don't know if he's never met mentally ill people that are seriously mentally ill. I don't know. A lot of people, by the way, just so everyone knows, a lot of people have never actually met seriously mentally ill people. A lot of people have seen movies and TV shows and stereotypes about mental illness. They've seen like the stereotype of a homeless person who's struggling with drugs or schizophrenia, who's mumbling to themselves in the street and stuff. And so they have a stereotype in their brain, and they believe that that stereotype is so rare and basically non-existent, essentially, that you could just give that person a place to stay and get them like a haircut and they'll be fine. But that's not true at all. Like, many of these people actually need meds. Many of these people actually need serious psychotherapy and rehabilitation and things like that. So I promise you that some people are extremely ill in a way that you cannot comprehend. Those stereotypes and over exaggerations you see in movies sometimes are real, and they are really like destroying people's lives in some way. And so again, I cannot fathom in any way, shape, or form. I really cannot fathom, like, who exactly is it that he is talking to who says people don't need those things, number one, but also, like, how can you say 99.9% of people? That's crazy. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I can't imagine how that makes any sense to anyone else. You know? So anyways, we're just going to move on. We're going to move on to the next topic. Okie dokie. So next up on the list. Okay, let's talk good therapy. Good therapy. I always try to like balance out all the negative critiquing stuff that I do here. So let's balance it out with good therapy, right? So there's this person I just recently met on Twitter. I think her name is Chris Canida, if I'm saying it correctly, Cannida, MSLPC. And her handle is at CHRIS_CANNIDA. So I'm going to repost this right now, and we're going to talk about it for just a second because I think it's a good example of what really matters and what you should hear from your therapist if you have one, for sure. So let me talk about this real quick. Okay. So about, let's see, when was this? This was 8/13, so August 13th. She said, as a therapist, I have the responsibility of both putting my own lost self on the back burner while also using it in fueling attunement to the client. Therapists must offer a certainty in our ability to stay fully present and not be thrown off course by the rise and fall of the patient's emotional swells. We must show the client we are not flailing in our own lostness while showing them how to endure feeling lost without fearing it's permanent. It can be unsettling to stay in touch with your vulnerable parts, yet that's exactly how empathy grows. So I have some things that I agree with here and some things that I don't agree with, but I definitely want to start by praising what I think is extremely important. And I think many people who have a therapist aren't getting this experience from their therapist. Many therapists are just average. That doesn't mean they're bad people. They're just mediocre, and that's okay. So a lot of clinicians, not all, however, a fairly sizable percentage of people that do the work as therapists, whether they're psychiatrists, psychologists, LPCCs, LMFTs, whatever. A lot of clinicians and trainees are completely confused when it comes to what to do with their own issues, right? And I'm going to try and say this as thoughtfully as I can without being rude. So here's the deal. It's very much the case that your average therapist is average. They're average in their intelligence and their understanding of themselves and all these kinds of things. And so you would expect that there'd be some challenges working with your average therapist because they are limited in their average in so many ways. And so one of the most important ways in which the average therapist is limited is their self-understanding. So, for instance, a lot of therapists have no clue what their personality organization is. They have some idea that they're kind of extroverted or introverted. They have some idea that they're kind of insightful or empathic or agreeable or not agreeable. But generally speaking, they don't have a lot of refined detail about who they are. And here's why this is a problem, just so everyone knows. So you could still help people and be mediocre. That's true. However, essentially, if you think about it, your personality, kind of like this person, what's her name again? Chris. Like Chris is saying, like the tools of our trade in psychotherapy are our personalities and our senses of self, who we are. Not just our technical skills if we learned ACT or CBT or DBT or psychodynamic theory or whatever, but like your unique personality structure and how you're built and how you respond and what your countertransference is and all these things. These are the things that very few people actually understand with a lot of detail. And Darren, thank you, Darren McGee, for showing up. This is perfectly said. That's where clinical supervision can be useful. I love being a supervisor, by the way. It's one of my favorite things that I do. And so, as a supervisor, I literally try to help my interns and my soon-to-be licensed therapist understand their personality, how they are built, what their strengths are, and what their weaknesses are. Because it's genuinely the case that most clinicians who are newer or uninsightful aren't helping people as much as they could be if they understood themselves better. And so if you know you're a very temperamentally agreeable therapist, or if you're a very temperamentally disagreeable therapist like myself, you know how you need to show up with people better. You know how you can meet people where they're at better because you are built differently, right? So those people at the 10th percentile or the 90th percentile on any given personality dimension are unique creatures, which means they need to show up differently. They need to be more aware of those differences and how they will affect their patients. And so it's very, very important for interns and supervisees to be looking at how they are built, number one, and number two, their countertransference, their personal issues, their biases, their baggage, the stuff that makes it harder and easier for them to relate to different types of people better or worse. And so what Chris is talking about in this tweet, which is why it's so important to me to reiterate and praise, is like, it's our responsibility to know ourselves as well as humanly possible. And the thing that just absolutely is mind-boggling to me are these graduate programs, not mine. I'm super thrilled with my grad program. I love my colleagues. They're awesome. I love my school. They treat me well. So like, genuinely speaking, there's so few actually good grad programs nowadays that teach future clinicians, psychologists, and master's level students alike to look at their own personality structure, look at their own baggage and countertransference, and try to understand the tool that you are and not be a tool, if that makes sense. So that is what Chris is correct about. Now, what Chris also said is Chris talked about being a lost self. So it's also equally true about many clinicians, maybe not all, maybe not even half. However, I'd be willing to bet that there's a large chunk of licensed clinicians who are kind of lost. They're existentially lost, midlife crisis. They have their own diagnosable mental health problems they haven't addressed and dealt with. And so there's a lot of sick people in the profession who are kind of lost. And so it is their ethical obligation to take a look at that and go, in what ways am I not capable of meeting the patient where they are at? Because however sick you are as a clinician will dictate to some degree how capable you are of tolerating your patient's sickness. You cannot be a wildly sick therapist and work with wildly sick people. That's a recipe for disaster, ethics violations, legal issues, and serious problems. So what I would say is, good job, Chris, for talking about lostness out in the public. More people need to understand that therapists are not magically perfect, healed creatures. In fact, in my experience, maybe this is just Southern California, my experience is most clinicians are kind of fucked up, to use a clinical term. And so because of that, it's the imperative, it is the ethical imperative of the clinician to figure out your shit. Figure out how you're built. Figure out what you are capable of tolerating and not capable of tolerating, right? Like, I know because of all the differences that I have, as just an easy example, I don't relate to little kids very well. They're boring and wildly emotional in ways that aren't interesting to me. In fact, it's kind of disgusting to me. I don't like little kids. I don't like the way that they are, not able to be adults, basically. That's a limitation of mine. So I will never, ever work with little kids, ever. because I know that I have whatever differences about me, etc., shit about my childhood, who knows? But whatever those things are, I don't care about little kids. I just don't. I don't relate to them. I don't care about them. And so I will never work with kids. I'm very aware that I have a differential reaction to young kids who are helpless or sad or happy or whatever it is. I just don't care. And because I don't care and they're not interesting and sometimes they're even disgusting, I will never work with them, right? It's something that's different about me. And because of that, I'm aware of it. So feel free to cancel me for that. But the truth of the matter is, because I'm acutely aware of this, I never waste my time having opinions clinically, professionally about child therapy. It's not my strength. It's not my specialty. I leave it to the people who are good at those things. And they can do that, right? And so in many ways, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfectly healed. You don't have to be perfectly insightful. However, whatever you're lost about, whatever your lostness is, as Chris said, you have to be willing to put it in a box, deal with it appropriately, and be able to show up for the patient. If you are so lost, if you are so sick, if you are so reactive, because a lot of therapists are reactive, and it's not good. Now, I'm kind of reactive on this podcast, but I'm not reactive in a clinical setting. But a lot of clinicians are very reactive, and that speaks to their issues, right? And so if your therapist is very reactive, that's probably a problem. There's probably something wrong there. That doesn't mean they have to be stone and stoic and shit. But if your therapist is having lots of reactions with you, it might be more than just being human with you. So another thing that Chris said that I want to pick up on is we must show the client we're not flailing in our own lostness. So your therapist should never have a hard time tolerating your stuff unless there's something extraordinary happening, right? So extraordinary things do happen, right? So extraordinary things happen like tragic, traumatic losses, natural disasters, crises, things like this can happen sometimes where it's harder for therapists to keep it together. But if you are so lost as the clinician, if you as the professional are so sick or lost or midlife crisis or early life crisis or burnout or whatever it is, that you can't tolerate the basic emotional experiences and the breadth and depth of normal human emotions with your patient, then you are basically engaging in unethical work as a clinician. So Chris is correct that you should never be flailing. It should never be drastically difficult to tolerate the emotional experiences of your patient. There's probably something wrong with you as the professional if you cannot tolerate it. That doesn't mean you can't have strong reactions internally, but if you can't keep your shit together during session, something's up. Something is up with you as the professional. So thank you, Chris, for this grist for the mill. I really appreciate you. The thing that I disagree with is the staying in touch with our vulnerable parts, yet that's how empathy grows. So like empathy can grow by being aware of where we're vulnerable or patients, bring up our countertransference or whatever it is. However, what I will say is that empathy is also not something that grows, just to be clear. Empathy is something that you are temperamentally more engaged in or not and capable of. So like, for instance, kids on the autism spectrum, adults on the autism spectrum might have some deficits of empathy, so on and so forth. And so it's really, really, really important to be clear that there's temperamental differences in empathy, and also there are ways in which it can improve to some degree for some people. So it's both. So that's why, as Darren said, if you're an intern, or even if you're a newer therapist, or even if you're a licensed therapist, and you're like, I don't know, maybe I should double check this piece of myself. If you're not in therapy, at least find supervision, right? Find a supervisor who can help you, right? One of my favorite things that I do in my career is I supervise and consult with licensed clinicians, and I supervise pre-licensed interns. And the joy of that is mentoring people across all the professional and, developmentally difficult challenges that these people face, because for the pre-licensed interns, it's like, who am I going to be? Who am I going to work with? Where am I going to work? All these things. But also they're discovering how to integrate their clinical skills with their developing identity around countertransference, personality style, all these things. Whereas for the more seasoned clinicians that I've had consultation conversations with and even supervision with, what I've really loved to do is help them find those little nooks and crannies where they're missing things, or where they're like a little fuzzy and they can be less fuzzy, right? Because some things should not be fuzzy, right? If you're having a countertransference reaction to a patient, that should never be fuzzy. That should be crystal clear. Either you had some similar identical experience in your life, or you are similar to them in some way, or you are not. It is that black and white. And so if it's fuzzy, we can make it unfuzzy through talking it out and maybe kind of helping you relax and have the conversation as a colleague, right? So I love supervision. If you don't have a supervisor or at least a consultation group, go get one. It'll keep you accountable. It'll help you grow, and you'll be more ethical and more effective typically, especially if you have colleagues and peers who get things like countertransference and personality style. All right, moving on. Next up here. So I'm going to go back to this thing. I think I talked about it a little bit last week when I had a headache. I apologize about that. But so I'm going to talk about this. I don't know how to say it. I guess counseling bill, if you want to talk about it this way. Let me retweet real quick, and then I'll get into it. By the way, thank you to those of you commenting right now. I appreciate you coming here. Darren, Aline, Phil, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to commenting. Share anything you want to share. All is welcome here. All thoughts are welcome. All right. So I think it was 8/16. It was August 16th. Grassroots Therapists, whose handle is at Rebecca_LPC, put out this alert that there's a priority bill, SB 400, HB 7, HB 789, whatever, in Texas somewhere. And the tweet goes something like this: the Texas Counseling Association openly opposes the Parental Bill of Rights because they think getting informed consent from parents is too much of a burden. Translation: they don't want you involved in your child's care. Parents, this should set off every alarm you have. So I'm not here to talk about the bill in Texas or anything like that. I don't particularly care because it's not my state and I don't have to fight that fight. I don't really care about any of that. What I would say is informed consent, and this is what I said in my response to her. Informed consent is really tricky. And for kids in particular, it's really important to get extra clear informed consent. Parents often don't understand what you're trying to do with their kids. So what I would say is it's really, really important to be extra clear in informed consent. However, what I actually said during the response to her was this. I said, somewhat of a side note, I rarely see clinicians engage in informed consent fully and correctly. So here's what I mean by that. So there are laws and ethics codes that talk about what clinicians, psychologists like myself, should be doing when we're providing informed consent to people. And most importantly, something that everyone should know, especially consumers of therapy. So if you are currently a consumer of psychotherapy or even supervision or whatever, I encourage you to think about what I'm about to say very carefully. So what I'm about to say is extremely important. It's absolutely 100% the case that when clinicians engage in informed consent, it is, number one, not a one-time process, right? So many clinicians believe that informed consent is, here's my, intake form, my consent form. Make sure you've read it. Do you have any questions about it? Blah, 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 blah. These are the, exclusions to confidentiality, child abuse, elder abuse, homicidal ideation, suicidal ideation, whatever. And so they just mumble past everything important to informed consent. And we're done because we started therapy and you agreed to the limits of confidentiality and HIPAA and all these things, and we're good. That's not informed consent. That's shitty informed consent, number one. So Problem number one is a lot of therapists believe that informed consent is just this one time at the very beginning when you sign the paperwork, going over California state law in my case, and what HIPAA says about confidentiality and all these things. That's not informed consent. That's doing the bare minimum. And a lot of people do the bare minimum as your therapist, unfortunately. The other problem is that most people's therapy is dynamic, right? It's evolving. And so the clinical picture, as we get to know each other, as we learn more information, as, other issues become clear, new modalities or new interventions might be useful. So part of every informed consent process should include an explicit conversation of the following two things. Number one, what are we currently agreeing to do? What do I currently believe the problem could be or is, right? So the problem could be major depressive disorder or a phase of life issue or whatever it is. But what are we agreeing to do about that problem is also part of the informed consent process. So that's not just, we're going to do CBT for 16 weeks to treat your major depressive disorder. That is not what we are here to do. When you're doing informed consent, you're going to explain the nature of the clinical work. So what does it mean to do CBT for 16 weeks? It means you're going to meet once a week for a minimum of an hour, and we're going to talk about these 3 topics, and I'm going to provide psychoeducation, and I'm going to give you homework, and we're going to talk about what next steps might be important to help work through your symptoms of major depressive disorder. So when you're doing informed consent, it is your job as a clinician to talk about the things that you're actually going to do. If your therapist is a fucking magician who says, we're going to talk about whatever's relevant, and whatever you need to talk about is whatever we'll talk about, then that person is being a magician, not being a therapist. They're being intentionally vague and lazy, in my opinion, because what we do is not rocket science. It might be a little more art than science in some cases, but it's not rocket science. So if you're a psychodynamic therapist and you're not a lazy asshole, you might talk about the fact that we're going to talk about the professional relationship that we're developing, because sometimes the emotions that show up in our professional relationship signify deeper, important things about you and about me. So you might even talk about concepts like transference and countertransference and what these interpretations and how the discussion is going to benefit them and give them actionable things to think about and do outside of therapy. That is informed consent. Informed consent is, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to get to know each other. We're going to figure out what's going on with you. That is bullshit. That is not informed consent. That is some narcissistic, grandiose, lazy asshole who believes that they can just kind of like half-ass it to try and like ease you into the relationship. And I'm all for different relationship styles. Definitely don't be like me, for sure. In fact, if I were to give anybody any advice out there, it's definitely don't be like me. There's only one me, and thank God. However, if you're not specific about what you're actually doing with the patient, you're lying to them and you're manipulating them. And a lot of interns do this accidentally because they weren't taught any better. And unfortunately, seasoned professionals who they think their shit doesn't stink, or they're lazy, or they don't care, don't also explain what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. It's not super deep, what I'm saying. And I promise you, it's also not super complicated. Therapy can get complicated, and you might even say that in your informed consent process. Like, especially those psychodynamic folks, it's like, yeah, there's deep transference issues and countertransference stuff, and it can get messy, and fantasies and projection and all these things, all of which are very complicated when they're happening in the moment, but they're simple to understand if you explain it, right? Because projection shouldn't be that complicated to explain. Either you can or you can't. Splitting, you can either explain or you can't. Even the CBT people get splitting. They call it black and white thinking. It's there. It lives there. Everyone can explain it. Everyone can understand it. So if your therapist is being a magician, talk to them about it. Ask them what specifically we're doing and how it's helping me. Because you should not just be there paying rent for someone. Basically, there's a lot of therapists, unfortunately, I believe, that basically are rent seeking. They're just interested in like working with people for whatever amount of time while not actually being clear about the thing that they're doing to help the person. And the problem with that is, if you don't have a concrete, practical approach to therapy, then you're just being a guru. You can be a psychodynamic therapist and still be concrete and practical, just like a CBT therapist typically is, or an ACT therapist. You know, you can be an existential therapist. You can be whatever flavor. But if you're not practical and concrete for people, you're most likely just kind of living out your fantasies as a clinician and getting your needs met at the expense of the patient. And that means you're doing something unethical and you're doing that patient a disservice. And shame on you. And so it's really important for newer clinicians to hear this message, which is informed consent is being precise and specific about what you're going to attempt to do, why you're going to do it, and if the patient understands the action plan together, no matter what your modality, no matter what your theoretical orientation. And if you can't explain things simply, you're probably just flim-flamming people. Because even the most complicated aspects of psychotherapy, including transference and projections and all these psychodynamic things, can be simply explained. We have dozens of textbooks. Everyone loves Nancy McWilliams and shit. Like, it's out there. It's explainable. You can explain it to patients. If you care about people, you will explain your thought process to them. It's not super complicated. So, thank you to everyone for talking about this with me. I hope that makes sense to everyone. And finally, before I move on, just to reiterate something I said earlier, informed consent is not just at the beginning of therapy. If you believe you need to change your strategy with people, you have to have that conversation I just outlined all over again. Okay, I've just noticed that there's a significant couples issue, and now you need to find a couples therapist or something like that. Or I've noticed there's the significant, psychiatric issue, maybe even you need medications, and here's a psychiatrist. And you need to explain why you think it could be helpful. It's not our job to convince people. It's our job to explain a crystal clear, easy to understand rationale for why we're doing what we're doing. And if you can't do that, you're basically a flim-flammer. I've seen perfectly smart people not be able to explain what they're doing as clinicians. This is something I do all the time in my graduate program. I teach future PsyDs and MFTs how to talk about their complicated modalities like ACT and CBT and psychodynamic work in concrete, practical ways so that patients can understand what you're doing and you can have a better clinical relationship with them and be more effective with them. Most people can understand what we're doing as therapists. And if you hide, if you pretend to be a magician, look over here while I make some fancy interpretations, while I don't explain why I'm doing it, that's just being a guru. And it's disgusting and not being a clinician. On a similar tangent, and this is one of my favorites, a guy named Jonathan Shedler, online therapist, kind of big person online. His handle is at JONATHAN SHEDLER. I'm going to retweet right now. Just one sec, sorry. All right. So 6 days ago, Jonathan Shedler, who is well known, at least online, I don't know about real life, but I think in real life too, well-known psychoanalytically oriented therapist who has a pretty big profile and talks a lot about important concepts in therapy. And so this is a really often overlooked concept, which I really want everyone to think clearly about. So he said on 8/15, so August 15th, just like 6 days ago or whatever, he said, his exact words were, therapists are often massively defended against aggression, their own personal aggression. They're in denial about their own aggression, and they do therapy in ways that force their patients to deny their aggression. It was true half a century ago. It's far worse now. Then you could talk about it. Now you get attacked. And so this is a more polemical discussion, but I want to get to the core of what he's saying because it's extremely important. And I know I talked about this a little bit last week, but I really want to reiterate this and hit this home because we have to be clear about what a human being is and is not, and what a therapist is and is not, right? So just to reiterate, he said 6 days ago, therapists are often massively defended against their own aggression. They're in denial about their own aggression, and they do therapy in ways that force their patients to deny their own aggression. So he's saying therapists are so defended against their own personal aggression that the way that they talk to their patients and try to help their patients, they're encouraging implicitly patients to not deal with the patient's own aggression and aggressive impulses. And so what I said in response to this was, therapists need to have a healthy relationship with the entire spectrum of the various intensities of aggression reactions and predatory aggression. So I just want to say a few words about aggression. So there is definitely this really challenging space that professionals in mental health find themselves in. We are indeed caught, I think. And I really want everyone to hear this, professionals and patients and consumers alike. Human beings, the normal human spectrum, normal statistically speaking, human spectrum of emotional experience includes some kind of aggressive reaction from time to time. It's really not weird. It's not confusing. It's not complicated. It can be complicated sometimes, but the real truth of the matter is it is 100% normal and even okay for regular people to have an aggressive reaction, to get angry, to get mad, to get irritable, to get agitated, whatever it is. That's normal and not weird. When we feel threatened, one of our 6 prototypical reactions to feeling threatened as a species is fight. Right? There's six responses, right? According to evolutionary psychologists: fight, flight, fright with an R, freeze, fawn, which is to play dead, and submit, which is to actually give up, right? So 2 of these responses are fight and fright, right? These are both aggressive reactions. They're not predatory aggression. That's a different biological, neurological process. But we have 2 reactions to feeling threatened. And so what Jonathan is saying is a great many therapists of all backgrounds feel threatened by their own aggressive impulses and reactions. Many therapists believe that they should be calm and kind and gentle and to never have an aggressive reaction ever as a professional. And here's the problem with that. I'm going to say something really complicated, so make sure you hear the whole thing and don't just clip something out of context. It is literally the case that we are ethically bound to handle and take care of our own personal mental health, right? So clinicians need to take a look at their own aggression reactions, whether they're more mild, like irritability and agitation and anger, or severe, like rage. It is our ethical responsibility to take a look at whatever they are for whatever reason. And also, it is also our responsibility to not hurt our patients. And so the problem is if you believe that you are a kind, sweet person, you're full of shit. Because every human being literally has the capacity to have aggressive reactions when they feel threatened. And so that's like saying the sky is blue. And so if you have this idealistic view of yourself, you're currently defending against something that you're not willing to say and tell the truth about. Now, you might be temperamentally extremely agreeable as a person at like the 90th percentile or greater of trait agreeableness, which means that you're going to present very pro-socially sweet and nice and soft and all these things. which is great. And you're built differently than most people. But most people have their personal stuff that makes them react when they feel threatened in an aggressive way. Some of it's political bullshit. I don't know why, but politics makes people insane and aggressive, especially in this profession. And so what I will tell you is that if you're a therapist who cannot understand and have a healthy relationship with whatever threatens you, then you are not helping your patients. Because when your patients feel threatened, what are you going to do? Are you going to tell them to be defended against their own aggressive impulses? Sometimes aggression is needed. If someone's threatening you, you might have to be aggressive to protect yourself. That's not weird. That's like, again, saying the sky is blue. Now, the art of using aggression like a martial artist would, that takes time. And I would guarantee that the vast majority of therapists don't really practice the martial arts of understanding their aggressive impulses. And so they don't understand what anger actually is and why it matters and why it's overused and underused, right? So for instance, on the right and on the left in the United States, at least, in the culture wars, there are lots of radical conservatives and moderate conservatives who have all this righteous anger about social justice shit. And they're just angry. And they're using their well-justified righteous anger to win a culture war. And likewise, the lefties also have, lefties therapists have the same, like, I'm here to protect people from racism and all these things. And they have righteous anger. And so the problem with both of those groups of people is they are justifying their aggressive impulses because they feel threatened professionally and or personally. And the problem with that is your personal feelings of being threatened have no place in your profession. And that's part of what Jonathan is talking about in his post. And so what happens is when you don't have a good relationship, dear therapists of every degree level, psychiatrists, psychologists, LPCCs, LMFTs, etc., when you do not have a good relationship with your own hurt and your own experiences of feeling threatened and the specific kinds of things that make you feel threatened, you're going to have outsized reactions to shit that doesn't matter. It's going to come out sideways. And so if you feel inferior in some ways, etc., or if you feel threatened for whatever reasons, be they valid reasons or invalid reasons, it's going to come out sideways in session with your patients. And you're going to role model stuff that's not good for your patients. And so every therapist, in my opinion, needs to have a crystal clear understanding of when they feel threatened, why they feel threatened, to what degree they feel threatened, and what they do with the anger and aggressive reactions, be they fright or fight responses. Some people get loud. Some people get, aggressive. Some people say aggressive things online. Some people are mean. Some people are harsh. Whatever it is, you need to figure it out. Dear therapists, dear interns, have a better relationship with whatever makes you feel threatened and be crystal clear about what anger, aggression means to you and how to have a better relationship with it, because it is not healthy to have zero relationship and think anger is all bad. Anger is a normal human reaction to feeling threatened or to have basic emotional needs not met. And so once you figure out what your unique experience is there, you can have a better relationship with it. And that's why I created this podcast, because so many people don't know things like what I just said. And what I said was fairly clear. So thank you, Jonathan, as always, for talking about extremely important things, because most people believe that their engagement in justice thinking and politics and culture wars and all these things in psychology is about the topic, when it's really just about the person. Which leads me to my next post. So I'm going to repost this right now. I don't know this person. We just met, so this is not about the person specifically. But it completely ties into what I just said. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to say your name correctly, and I apologize if I screw it up. It's not intentional in any way, shape, or form. I promise you it's not like unconscious passive aggression. It's just I don't know you, and I've never heard you say your name. So the person's name, I believe, is Soad Tabrizi, and I'm going to spell it out. The handle is at SOADTABIR, or no, TABRIZI, Soad Tabrizi. And if I'm saying it wrong, I apologize. So Soad put this post up 5 days ago, and I'm going to try and read the thing word for word. Soad said, in quotes, safe spaces. Oh, thank you, Soad. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you're here. And please, while I'm reading, please respond to anything you think I'm getting wrong or exaggerating or underselling. Like, please come at me really hard so that I can be clear. Okay? So 5 days ago, Soad put out this post that I think is extremely important because it's complicated. So I'm going to try and stick in the complicated mess that it is, but also try to be clear about my stance different from Soad's. So here's what she said in quotes. Safe spaces, in quotes, close quote, are not exclusive to progressives. Conservatives deserve them too. And she basically is advertising a website, find your safe space at conservativecounselors.com. Conservativecounselors.com? Yeah, conservativecounselors.com. So I had an automatic reaction to this, as I do, because I'm trying to be reasonable, right? And so this is my attempt at being reasonable, even though it's kind of critical, okay? So here's what I said, verbatim, right? I said, politics and therapy is a terrible combination. Point number one. Point number two, I get why conservatives do these things. I still disagree. Overreaction begets overreaction. And then Soad and I had a bit of a dialogue. And then what I literally said is no safe spaces for anyone. We need to fix graduate schools and create healthier role models in the public eye, not create silos. I fully get why, or at least I think I fully get why this is created. I just disagree with the approach, with all due respect. And I genuinely mean with all due respect. It's not sarcastic or passive aggressive. And so here's why I had the reaction I had, just so everyone can be clear about it. I have lots of friends who are conservatives, and I have lots of friends who are progressives. I live here in Southern California. What would you imagine? And so here's why I said politics has no room, or there's no room for politics in therapy. What were my exact words? I said, politics and therapy is a terrible combination. Those are my exact words. So here's my reaction. Here's, I think, the charitable interpretation of what Soad, et cetera, is trying to do. So my reaction is when we create more silos, which I said at the end of my post, that what happens is it creates echo chambers, number one. And number two, the consequence, which I think is one of those like unintended, it's not going to be that bad consequences, but actually gets worse than we think it is consequences, is we have a lot of people who start to have an unrealistic view of the rest of the world. And that is my problem with silos and echo chambers, is that the more conservatives stick with conservatives and progressives stick with progressives in the clinical setting, right? Progressives only treat woke people, and then conservatives only treat based people. And again, that's an exaggeration and like an overgeneralization, but like the more we create these spaces and normalize it, what it's doing is it's creating silos that will have the unintended consequence of really not seeing each other. Because the only way we can fully understand each other is to be in relationship with each other, right? So like one of the reasons that I think I'm a very lucky person, and I don't mean this in like a humble brag kind of way, I just think like it's just good luck that I've ended up where I'm at, is like I have really good colleagues here in SoCal who are very progressive and very conservative. In fact, I even helped one of my colleagues turn conservative, even though that's not who I am. And so um, my experience has been that when I talk to people, not only publicly, but also privately, both, like in faculty meetings, but also at coffee meetings and things like that, the conversation I get to have is actually fairly reasonable. And because of that, I believe that I have a model in my brain which sees people as complicated and in many cases reasonable. But the worry, the intense worry that I have, Soad, just so you know where I'm coming from, is the more we create these silos, the more that our mental models of other people who are different than us become very distorted, like funhouse mirrors. Because when we only talk to people that think like us, there's a really good chance that those people aren't going to be hanging out with different kinds of people, if that makes sense, like birds of a feather. And so my concern genuinely is not that conservatives need spaces where they cannot be judged. There's a to steel man your perspective, Soad, I 100% agree, genuinely agree that conservatives have been shit on over and over and over again in clinical psychology by the American Psychological Association, etc. Maybe not by name, but basically, it's basically anyone who is like center or center right is now the devil or has been the devil in this country for the last, I don't know, like 10 years, essentially. So I can understand and I can sympathize with why people who are more center right, right leaning, want places where they know they're not going to be judged unnecessarily by their therapist. I can appreciate that and I can understand that, and I don't have a judgment about that. I get that goal. The problem that I have with that is it's going to reinforce this siloing of people. And I see lots of unintended consequences, lots of them, lots and lots and lots of them. And so I'm going to respond to what you're saying right now, but I just want you to know that I really do genuinely believe that I understand why you're doing it, and I see what you believe is useful about it. And I think there are lots of unintended consequences that are coming our way the more conservatives do these kinds of things. And I believe there's a better alternative, but I want to read what you're saying first and respond to it. And then I'll tell you what I believe my alternative is and if you think it's better or not, or doable, right? So Soad is saying, I completely agree with you. I hate echo chambers and I know exactly where you're coming from. However, conservative clients are afraid of seeking help because of judgment. Like I said, I just created a site to help them get the help they need, hopefully by a therapist that doesn't bring politics into the room. And so the way you just phrased it, Soad, is by a therapist that doesn't bring politics into the room. But if you're going to call it conservativecounselors.com, you're automatically bringing politics into the room. That's a problem with that. And she says, and you're right, there will be unintended consequences. I'm willing to take that chance if it means conservatives seek help. And yes, give me alternative. Okay, so let me walk out my alternative vision. Again, with all due respect and no judgment, because I genuinely don't know you, so like I have nothing to judge. So my alternative is, how do we take what's happening between you and I right now and many other people that I've talked to and that you've talked to and make it as public as humanly possible? So what I would like to do is I would like to take the hill by force, if that makes sense, if that metaphor works for you. So what I would really, really like to do to destroy some of the silos like Drew's talking about, what I would like to do, I would like to destroy those silos by taking these conversations we're having right here, Drew and Soad and Darren and everyone who's come here. Thank you for coming out. What I'd like to do is take these conversations and shove them down the throats of the public. Because what's happening is we have two dynamics that we can completely defeat if we are all banded together appropriately. So dynamic one is we have this priest class, right? So you have these priests and priestesses and these clergy at the American Psychological Association, the AMA, and the American Psychiatric Association, and like the heads of faculty at universities all over the country. And so what I would like to do is I would like to essentially bring the fight to the priest class and build momentum and show people the reasonable middle of like center left, center right people that exist, which is the majority of people in the profession, in my opinion, by the way. And I want to take every conversation like this and shove it in the priestly class's faces. Because I think only what's going to fix this problem for real long term is not creating more silos. I think what's going to fix this problem for real is taking this conversation and making it painfully public and making it extremely popular. Like if I had a magic wand right now, there would be like a discussion hosted on every major podcast, like Andrew Huberman and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and all these famous fucking people. And if we could get 4 different types of therapists in the exact same room, super progressive, middle conservative, super conservative, in the exact same room, and just show how we all have some common ground and how we can defeat this like left-right bullshit. And we can break down some of the silos publicly together through reasonable conversation. We can defeat the priest class, because the problem to me is the priest class. It's that regular people, one of the reasons I started this podcast, by the way, is because I'm fucking tired of the authority figures who don't know what they're doing and not willing to be adults. And I'm going to showcase real righteous anger and frustration at people not being good adults, not being good supervisors, not talking about the full range of human experience, putting their political bullshit and making their political bullshit more important than the patient's well-being, right? I'm going to fight the conservatives who are like this and the progressives like this just as bad, just as equally, because they're just as bad in my opinion. And so the reason I'm having the reaction I am so had is I want to take this silo problem and I want to destroy them publicly, because I want us to be able to talk to each other. And until we act like the adults that we say we are publicly and privately, it's going to be very difficult, extremely difficult, to convince any of the priestly class. And I want us to be more powerful. I see a world in which we can be more powerful than the priest class at the APA, the AMA, whatever. I think it's totally doable and totally possible. It's just that these conversations happen in tiny podcasts or little Twitter arguments online like you and I had, disagreements. Like, these need to get bigger. The solution is reasonable people need to get bigger and get louder. And I will support anyone in trying to be reasonable in public. I'll retweet you. I'll follow you. I'll come on your podcast, whatever it is. Let's make reasonable sexy. But the problem is, reasonable is not sexy. What's sexy is silos. So you're selling a silo, which I have a problem with philosophically, because I think it worsens the problem unintentionally down the road. You're going to help some people in the short term, but down the road, it's going to continue to create the division that we're fighting against. She says, put me in, coach. I'm down. Let's go. Let's figure shit out. Let's do it. The thing is, I'm so optimistic because of technology, because of podcasts, because of social media. There are reasonable people everywhere. A lot of the people that I talk about, even though I disagree with them, like No BS Therapist and Jonathan Shedler and all my conservative friends and all my progressive friends, is like, they're reasonable. I don't have to fully agree with them whatsoever. You know? So my hope, my genuine hope, is to destroy the priest class. I want them to be embarrassed and in a shambles. I want to come at the institutions and I want them to feel so threatened that they have to sue me, unfortunately. And it might come to that. And I'm not some big, rich, crazy person who thinks I can take on the APA. I'm just saying that I know what's going to need to happen is going to be mess. It's going to get messier. But the problem is not the average clinician who's trying to do the right thing. The reason I have a good reputation here in SoCal is because I genuinely try to do the right thing, even if it doesn't make me money, even if it's not good for the business I'm helping. I just want to do the right thing. That's it. That's all I care about, you know? And if I get to make some money doing that, awesome, amazing. And that, I think, is ethical. The ethical thing is let's do the right thing first, you know, which might mean I look bad. It might mean something bad comes up. It might mean something challenging about the field comes up, right? That's what I want to destroy. I want to destroy this priest class reputation of clinical psychologists. You can be a regular person and a professional. That's the great secret. right? But these priestly people who are mostly sick, every head of the APA has been some kind of wildly sick person, right? Like, we need to get rid of the priests. The priests need to go away altogether. Drew Linway says, I think public perception of the field is driven by the priest class you describe. Exactly. When you spoke to Wilfred Riley, it seems to me that his ideas about psychology are largely based around this view. Yeah, most people online, the average person who consumes anything podcast-wise, social media, Instagram influencer-wise, whatever, is just getting fed such bullshit by the priest class. The people with large followings, the people from the APA and the AMA who have been there, like, and I don't have a problem with you being famous. I don't have a problem with you having a large following. God bless. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with you being a guru. I have a problem with you taking your status and pretending your shit doesn't stink. That's what I have a problem with. If you're like an Andrew Huberman type and you admit that you're wrong about something, I have respect for you. But if you don't think you're wrong, then you're full of shit. I'm wrong all the time. The best thing about being a professor is I have smart graduate students who come at me and say, I disagree, you're wrong. That's the best thing about it. Because I get to learn more shit, you know? So I think the solution is let's all band together and destroy the priestly class and create better structures and systems of accountability so that the silos aren't needed. The silos should not be needed. You can certainly have your conservative friends or your progressive friends. However, it should never be needed in this profession. I'm a crazy person, and somehow I can be friends with people who think very differently than me. So either I'm not that crazy, which I hope is true, or I'm just lucky. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Maybe it's God. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. All I'll tell you is that I am not so smart and so special that I can have friends who think differently than me. I think all of us are capable of it. I think everyone is capable of it. And if you have strong feelings about someone who thinks differently than you, or has different morals than you, or incentive structures than you, then you're part of the problem, in my opinion. And so to not be part of the problem, we have to work together. And that's it. I just want to gut the priest class out of the system and modify the pieces of the system that are still useful. That's why I love being a professor, because I have reasonable colleagues. I'm the luckiest man in the world that I have great colleagues, smart people who care. Some of them are more progressive than me, and that's great because they're going to help me see things that I can't necessarily see because I'm built differently. And that's awesome, right? And so genuinely speaking, I'm a lucky person. And if you don't realize how lucky you are that you're in this profession, you have people who think differently than you, then you're stuck in the culture wars and not stuck in reality. That's the problem. Okay, so I think that is enough for today. Kind of over our time here. I really appreciate everyone coming out and having a chat. Soad, Drew, Darren, everybody, Phil, everyone, thank you for being here. It's been awesome chatting with you. I really appreciate collegial conversation. You know, everyone's opinion is welcome. There's no opinion that is not welcome on this podcast. And so I want this conversation to continue. I want reasonable people to do reasonable things. And I want reasonable people to be the sexy people. I don't want the unreasonable, siloed, ideologue people to be the sexy people. And we can build this together. That's what I want to build. I want to build a community of reasonable people, right? And it's doable. And you're all here part of it. So thank you for being part of it with me and helping me. So we'll do this again next week, Saturday afternoon sometime. And until then, please, like and share and subscribe. I really appreciate you coming out. If you think it was helpful or interesting, feel free. Also, I just want to say thank you to everyone who saw the Wilfred Riley podcast and my Ryan McRogers podcast. There's so many cool things I've been able to do, cool people I've been able to talk to. So let's keep going. Let's keep doing shit together. Let's make this better because I'm optimistic. It can get better. That's why I started this podcast. So many of these simple things that can make clinical psychology better and therapy better for people are not rocket science. And it's just, we got to get the ideas out there and just do basic things to make things better. And as always, I try to end this podcast with some kind of terrible dad joke. And so here we go. I went to this patient who really, really, really liked vampire movies. and he was obsessed with them, obsessed with vampire movies. And he's kind of, I think, built a little differently. I don't know. But anyways, so he was having a really hard time dating because he's kind of an awkward, strange guy. And he had this like very stereotyped specific interest in this one type of genre of film. And so he kind of dressed like a vampire, a little awkward, little divergent kind of guy. And so anyways, he finally lucked out and got a date. He met someone who also was into horror films. And so that was like a kind of a commonality. And he kind of had some vampire garb, like Dracula dressing on, and they both thought it was kind of funny. She dressed up too, so they kind of like nerded out together on their first and second dates, which was awesome. And then third date comes around, and he goes to the restaurant to meet this chick, and she didn't show up. In fact, she ghosted him. And he came into therapy the next day, and he said, "You know what, Doc, I feel really sad because I thought we were getting along. She was kind of nerdy like I am, blah, blah, blah. She wasn't there." And I looked at him. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's terrible." I said, "What do you think you're going to do now?" He said, "I don't know. I think I'm just going to, you know, go back online, see who I can find. Maybe find another kind of like goth chick, vampire girl, whatever it is." Good. Great. I hope that goes well. He goes out next week, comes back. He says, "I found a brand new girlfriend." I said, "Awesome. What's it been like?" I said, "Well, it's been really kind of fun because she also really likes vampire movies. She dressed like a vampire. She has fake vampire teeth and stuff like that. But I don't know if she's a good fit for me." I said, "Why? Why not?" And he said, "She's really, really, really into vampires." I said, "Like you?" She's like, "No, like really into vampires. Like she doesn't have vampire fake teeth. She like cut her teeth. She went to like a dentist to get her teeth cut like fangs." I said, "Okay, that's interesting." Next week comes back, says, "I really think I should break it up with her because she's like super duper obsessed with vampires. And she's kind of scaring me because she's like talking about drinking my blood and stuff. And like, I'm into vampires, but I'm not that into vampires." I said, "Well, what have you thought about doing with her?" He's like, "I really don't know what I should do with her." I said, "Well, have you thought about garlic?" And he looked at me and he chuckled and went home. Anyways, that's my terrible attempt. I'll see you all next week. Be good to yourselves. Be good to other people. Take good care. And I will see you